Welcome everyone to today's session. We're going to be discussing the recent significant legislation that Congress just passed, the Social Security Fairness Act, which was signed by President Biden on January 5th. It's kind of funny. I think about this. Congress rarely names legislation that makes sense, kind of like the Inflation Reduction Act. The names don't always indicate what it's really about. But in this case, I think they got it right. So I'm here today with my guest, Hamilton Morales. He's kind of my go-to expert on everything Social Security. He's a national speaker, goes around the country, talks about Social Security, answers people's questions. He does work for Financial Independence, lives outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. Hamilton, I think I caught you on the road today. Where are you at?
Yeah, I'm actually in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So it's a
Oh,
it's a
awesome.
balmy 35 degrees today.
That's
So
surprising.
they're having a
I would
heat wave here.
I'd expect it to be about 10 and you're buried under a foot of snow. I'm
That's what
sure
it
you get a
was
lot of
last week.
Yeah, I'm sure you get a lot of questions about this legislation, and I'm sure that, everyone that's out there probably has a million questions. But before we dive in, we should give a little bit of background about what's going on and about Social Security. A lot of public employees like teachers, firemen who receive government pensions like STRS or OPERS have been extremely frustrated, and I think that's an understatement, but they're really frustrated about something called the windfall elimination provision or the government pension offset. These provisions were originally designed, albeit wrongly, I believe, but they're originally designed to prevent people from double dipping, really receiving both government pension and Social Security benefits. So, Hamilton, I want to first off just ask you if you could first explain why someone who is getting a government pension might qualify or might not qualify for Social Security as well.
Yeah. So prior to the Social Security Fairness Act being signed into law, basically how it worked was like this, and not every state works this way. In fact, Ohio actually has the highest percentage of state workers who do not pay into Social Security, 97%. So they're the highest. In North Carolina, we don't have any. So it is kind of a state by state. Or if you work for the federal government, certain federal agencies also don't pay into Social Security. So basically, how it works is like this. In order to qualify for Social Security benefits, you have to pay into Social Security. And that's typically done through the private sector. So if you had a job prior to your state job, then you were paying into Social Security. And if you would have hit 40 credits, you would have qualified for those benefits. Now, there are some people that come right out of college and go, let's say, right into the teaching profession in Ohio and have never paid into Social Security and they've never hit their 40 credits. Therefore, they do not qualify for their own Social Security benefits. So in essence, that's how that works. And so what the government did is they said, okay, for those people who did qualify for their own Social Security benefits and then later on worked in the public sector with the government, state government, and did not pay into Social Security, we're going to let you get your Social Security benefits, but they're going to be reduced based off of how many years of substantial earnings you paid into Social Security. So if you were under 20 years, you had the maximum reduction, and then it went up 5% from there. So what this provision did, or what this act did, was just completely eliminate that. And so now for those people who do qualify for their own Social Security benefits, they don't have to worry about the windfall elimination provision reducing that benefit. They're going to get
So,
100% of their benefit plus their pension.
right, I think a lot of people were just so frustrated with these rules and thought they were unfair. But can you briefly just explain how that windfall elimination provision or government pension were used? How they reduced their Social Security benefits? Because I know to
Yeah,
get Social Security, you had to pay into it for at least 10 years, get your 40 credits. And
right.
we're going to skip ahead. We're going to skip over some things. I apologize, but we don't want to spend too much time in the weeds and get into detail. But if you could just briefly explain what that windfall elimination provision is, the government pension is
Mhm.
calculated, or how it
Sure.
applies to Social Security.
Well, the windfall elimination, windfall, I'm going to just call it the WEP. So the WEP only affected those individuals who qualified for their own Social Security, but also had a state job where they did not pay into Social Security. And so once they turned their pension on when they retired, their Social Security benefits would be reduced. That's the WEP. And that calculation is a little more difficult to explain.
Yes.
So I won't really get into that. But the only way to get out of it was to have 30 or more years of substantial earnings paid into Social Security. That's the only way to, back then, that was the only way to eliminate the WEP, your Social Security being reduced. Now, the government pension offset's a little different. I call it the evil twin. And that had to deal with the same person, but as it related to their ability to qualify for spousal or widow's benefits. And that calculation's a lot easier. Basically, what they would do is they would take 2/3 of their gross monthly pension and they would subtract that from whatever the benefit they wanted, the widow's benefit or the spousal benefit. If the 2/3 pension was greater, that means they didn't get a benefit. If it was less than, then the difference between the two was what they actually got. And so the GPO affected all of those people who did not pay into Social Security. The WEP only affected those who did not pay into Social Security, but had Social Security benefits from a previous private sector job where they did pay in. So that's where some of the confusion came in between the WEP and the GPO. It still affected the same person, just in different ways.
Right, right. So I want to first kind of discuss the WEP a little bit. So what if a retiree right now is getting a government pension, as well as Social Security? How will this legislation affect them?
Yeah, so a couple of different things. It's funny, haha, like interesting. Uh, the House passed this back in, gosh, I want to say August. It was passed, and the Senate did not take it up and vote on it until when I say the very last minute, I'm not kidding. It was the very last thing they voted for before midnight, the night before Congress was to transition over. Had that not been voted on, nothing would have been done. It would have died. So they waited till the very last minute to actually pass this, which of course is ridiculous, but it is what it is. They got it passed. Now, Joe Biden signed it into law January 5th. And the way this works is that now, let me back up. Understand this is a government agency, Social Security. Also understand that this affects roughly 2.8 million people. So it's going to take them a little bit to get everything worked out. So I'm hoping first quarter we'll see things change. Hopefully that should happen. But basically, what they're going to do is for those people who are currently taking their government pension and on Social Security, and that Social Security benefit has been reduced, what the government's going to do is they're going to retroactive back that to January of 2024. So what you should have gotten, that difference from last year, you're going to get a lump sum deposit into your account to make up for that difference. And then from January 2025 until they actually get this thing going. So let's say the first deposit's going to be in May, let's just say. So from January to April, they're also going to give you a lump sum for that difference for that period of time. And then hopefully in May, everything will be up to where it needs to be. You'll be getting your full Social Security benefit that you should have gotten before
And I
the
think
WEP.
that makes me think of another question that's got to be on everybody's mind, which is, okay, and I have a client that's getting roughly 3,500 a month in a government pension, like STRS,
Uh-huh.
and they're getting about 500 from Social Security. And the question is, well, how much is that going to be? How much more? And they asked me that, and I'm like, no way to calculate it. But my expectation, my limited understanding of how the WEP is calculated is based on that. I would think they'd get an extra 400 or 500 a month.
Could be.
But
It
it's
could be
really hard
that
to say.
high. It
Yeah.
really is. I mean, there's a lot of factors that come into play there. Number one, when did they
Yes.
turn their Social Security on? Was it prior to full retirement age? Was it after full retirement age? That's a piece of it. And then again, how many years of substantial earnings did they pay into Social Security? Were they
Right.
under the 20 years, where that's the maximum reduction, or were they over the 20 years so it wasn't as severe? So all those things come into play, and that's why I'm saying it's going to take a little while. I mean, not only do you have to deal with 2.8 million people that this affects, but you've got a new administration. You've got to, all this stuff has got to go into their system to get this stuff paid out. So it's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah, but it's pretty amazing how quick they got those checks out during the pandemic. So I have hope.
Well, that's a little different.
Yeah, I'm
That had
sure.
nothing to do with Social Security.
Right. Now, to quickly change subjects a little bit, I'd like to talk a little bit about spousal benefits. Can you
Mhm.
explain, kind of again, a little bit? I think it's best to start off with how do spousal benefits work? But I think about it in two ways. First of all, assuming no that person does not have a government pension, and then secondly, how someone who receives a government pension and their spouse gets Social Security.
Yeah, well, it's no different now. It
Exactly.
was different before.
Right.
So about what I'm getting ready to tell you is works for everybody now. So you don't have to worry about the GPO, the government pension offset, taking away this benefit. So there's twofold. You've got the spouse that wants the spousal benefit, and they qualify for their own benefit. So the way this works is that two things have got to happen. Number one, your spouse must turn on their benefit. Don't care if they turn it on first, they turn it on second, how old they are when they turn it on. They just have to have it turned on. And then number two, the second thing that's got to happen is you have to turn your benefit on. Again, doesn't have to be first, it can be second. Doesn't make any difference how old you are. You just have to have it turned on. Once both benefits have been turned on, what Social Security is going to do is they're going to look at, when I say I'm talking about that's the person who wants spousal benefits. So they're going to look at your full retirement age benefit amount, and they're going to compare it to half of your spouse's full retirement age benefit amount. If your full amount is greater than their half, you don't qualify for spousal benefits. That's it. You're just going to get your own, and that's all you're going to get.
But most likely,
However,
if someone's getting a government pension, that's probably not going to be the case.
true.
Right.
And that's what's going to go to the second one is if your full retirement age benefit amount is less than your spouse's half, then you do qualify for spousal benefits. And what they're going to do is they're going to subtract those two numbers, your full amount minus their half, and the difference is the spousal portion that will get added on to your benefit. Now, if you take your Social Security benefits at full retirement age, and then they do this calculation, when they add those two together will equal half of your spouse's full retirement age benefit amount. That's where the 50% comes in. However, if you turn yours on early, your benefit's going to be reduced. And if you get the spousal portion early, that portion's going to be reduced. So when you add those two together, they will not equal half of your spouse's full retirement age benefit
And
amount.
when you say earlier, you're basically saying before their full retirement age,
Correct.
which typically would be somewhere between 66 and 67. This leads
Correct.
into a really good question. I had a client email me this morning, and I'd like to read this to you. It gets a little muddy, but they said normally when filing Social Security benefits, you're given the option to retroactively file up to 6 months early. Now
Mm-hmm.
that this legislation is passed and the GPO is eliminated, government pension spouses, so someone getting their government pension, are now at the full retirement age without that reduction. And she asked, are government spouses permitted to apply for retroactive spousal benefits all the way back to January of 2024?
On the two factors, right? So regardless of what we're talking about, government employees or not, two things had to be true prior to January of 2024. One, their spouse must have had their benefits turned on. Now, if that government spouse never qualified for their own spousal or their own Social Security benefits, okay, then we have to make sure the first one happened, which is their spouse turned on their benefit prior to January 2024. And being eligible means that the spouse had their benefit turned on prior to January 1st, 2024, and the government spouse was either old enough to get it, age 62, and just couldn't because of the G prior to January 1st, 2024. So there's a lot of factors that go into that on whether they're going to be able to get that.
Another question around spousal benefits is what if someone, who's receiving a government pension already and their spouse had passed away? Would they now be eligible for the deceased spouse's Social Security benefit?
So husband passed away a couple of years ago. So she would be eligible, right? And because of her pension, the 2/3 of her pension was too high. So she couldn't get widow's benefits. And because of this legislation, not only can she get that now, but they are going to retroactively pay that because she was eligible January of 2024. She just couldn't get it because of the GPO. That makes sense?
Yes. We have a married couple. One's has a government pension, and the other one has Social Security. The plan was, well, if that spouse that gets Social Security dies first, they lose potentially, half of their income with no widow's benefit.
Yep.
It's just going to have a huge impact on so many people.
Another
question, I had was about taxes that a client just asked me yesterday. If someone receives a lump sum pension, from Social Security that should have been paid in 2024 because it's retroactively for or 2025 tax return.
Given the fact that the chances that money is not going to get paid before the April 15th deadline, or it's going to be real close, it's probably going to go 2025.
Yeah,
I would be shocked, or they could come back and just say, hey, we're just not going to put any taxes on that. Now, we're talking government here, so I doubt that's going to happen.
Right.
But it could. They very well could do that.
I think the answer to that is we don't have a definitive answer. And if you're thinking about doing your taxes, I'd probably hold off for a month or two before doing your taxes just to make sure. Otherwise, you may have to go back and retroactively or at least fix your tax return. So
yeah, it's possible.
So when do you think, I know you answered this before, but just to drill this, and based on what you said, when do you think you can expect people to see a change in their Social Security benefits? And do you think that retroactive payment would be in April, but they might start here in February in the monthly benefits?
Yeah, I'm really hoping first quarter. No, again, remember, 2.8 million people this affects. You've got to change things in the system at Social Security. And oh, by the way, we have a completely new administration. So all those things are happening right now. And so, and it's a government agency. So you got those dates given at this point.
Hey, I'd like to mention too, at the bottom of, for those that are watching right now live, there at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A button. And if you'd like to ask a question that's pertaining to this topic, we could try to get it in, but I know we're kind of nearing the end of this. I'd like to mention that, we have a white paper that Hamilton put together on this topic that we will be emailing this out to you within the next week or so, along with a link to the recording of this webinar. And I think it's important for you to know you will feel free to share that link to this webinar or to the white paper.
I also want to say one thing too while you're looking. It's very difficult when we're dealing with Social Security because there's so many. When people ask me a question, I'm down to the specific situation. Sure. And so it's very difficult to give a broad stroke about, well, this is kind of what happens because it is so different. There's so many different parameters that they look at as it relates to how these things work. So if you are curious, don't hesitate to reach out to Pat and get that question out there so we can answer it for you. But the more specific you can be with that question, the more accurate and more specific I can be with the answer.
All right, I have one question. It says, would I be eligible for my ex-husband to get a pension from teaching and a small Social Security amount is
So
Social Security is $22.50 a month.
yeah, so it depends. Um, the answer to that question for the most part is most likely. And so there are some consecutive years before you got divorced, which sounds like you were, and you're currently not married. I don't care about your ex-husband, but you're currently not married, then chances are you are eligible for spousal benefits. Now, if you get remarried, as long as you got I know there's a lot. I'm throwing a lot at you, and I'm sorry about that. But again, that's why it's so important for specific questions on widow's benefits. If he passes away, you are eligible for you could be also eligible for the widow's benefit even if you remarried, as long as you remarried after your 60th birthday. I know there's a lot there, but the answer is most likely you would be. And if you've already give it a month or two, and then I would actually follow up with them and have them get that on their radar. It should happen automatically, but again, we're talking about a government agency.
One last comment. Someone mentioned that Social Security issued guidelines or guidance last Friday stating,
not surprising. So just kind of hold on to your seats, and I mean, just know that again, they've got to do all these calculations, all these different scenarios for people. Some people would get the whole thing for the whole year for 2024. Some would only get it for a portion of 2024 because they weren't eligible for the early people. It really could take a year for this to happen.
well, fortunately, we've got some really smart people that work in the government, so I have confidence it'll happen sooner. No sarcasm there. Hey,
None at all.
I'm gonna kind of end it on that note. To meet with myself, or we could even bring Hamilton in on a call. Please contact our office or call me or email me. We hope this webinar was helpful, and we just thank you so much for being with us taking the time to be with us today. So, but with that, that concludes our webinar. Thank you very much.